Happy Wednesday. Don McLaughlin checking in with you in a rainy Steamboat Springs for another edition of Wednesday Wisdom. And today we dive deep into an approach to nutrition that really turns the American diet on its head, with really shifting away from a diet that so often is full of carbs and processed foods, and really has a goal of losing excess weight, boosting energy and resilience, and reducing inflammation inside the body. How do we do this? Our PurePower approach is heavily informed by two other approaches. One called the Slow Carb Diet, which is advocated by an author named Tim Ferriss, who wrote the 4-Hour Workweek, the 4-Hour Chef, the 4-Hour Body. He really goes into it in detail in the 4-Hour Body, as well as another approach called the Whole 30. And they share many common elements, the most important of which is really staying away from refined carbs that are unhealthy. And what do I mean by unhealthy? Carbs that spike insulin response. And another dimension to this that we hear a lot of is high glycemic and low glycemic foods. And the approach that we advocate is one that is low glycemic foods. The reason is because they don't trigger that insulin response, and the downstream consequences of that insulin response is that when we're eating refined carbs, the body converts that into glucose, those carbs, and excess amounts of glucose again spike an insulin response inside the body, and then the body has nowhere to store that excess glucose or sugar, and it stores it in fat. So there's really three principles that we want to focus on with respect to this PurePower approach to eating, that over the course of 30 days really can have a significant impact on those three primary areas. Again, losing excess weight, boosting energy and resilience, and reducing inflammation inside the body. So what are the three steps? We're going to focus on two primarily today, and the third one we're going to talk about next week. The first is to avoid those refined carbs, and in particular, anything that's white. So white bread, pancakes, white rice, dairy, really eliminating these for 6 days of the week, and instead focusing on lean meats, green leafy veggies, and legumes. And a great place to start is just with breakfast. So here's an idea to start with just one meal, to start to shift into this way of eating. A breakfast would look like 2 whole eggs, some organic green leafy veggies, spinach perhaps, steamed spinach, with some legumes, perhaps lentils or pinto beans. A great way to start off the day with, again, low glycemic foods that won't boost an insulin response that I think we so often know with a traditional diet of pancakes or again other high carbs. There's always a crash in mid-morning or late morning. This approach, again, more sustainable, low glycemic. So again, just to recap, foundational element number one is avoiding white foods for 30 days, and instead focusing on lean proteins, green leafy veggies, and legumes as a basic rule of thumb. The second component is to really eliminate, or at least avoid, sugars, again, 6 days of the week. And what this does is, again, it avoids that insulin spike that leads to the creation of excess fat and inflammation inside the body. So obviously straight sugar is out, but also fruit, avoiding fruit 6 days a week. Also other hidden sugars, in the form of honey or agave, things like that, sweeteners in drinks, really staying away from those. Also dressings, there's so much sugar in everything. So this does take a little bit of work, but any effort we can take toward eliminating sugars for 6 days of the week, great. Alcohol is another obviously hidden sugar. The Whole30 really says no alcohol for 30 days, but my experience, and I think the slow carb diet approach is, 1 or 2 glasses of wine is fine. Really, beer is probably best to stay away from because it's full of carbs and it creates the same insulin spike. So that's principle number 2. One additional dimension to this, and just the whole approach to liquids in particular, again, not drinking calories, so avoiding sugary drinks, certainly sodas, and limiting alcohol intake, and preferably just wine. But also emphasizing the importance of hydration. I think it's so often overlooked. And the important thing is to drink half your body weight in ounces of water a day. So for me, roughly 170 pounds, 85 ounces of water a day for me. And now, when to drink water relative to when we're consuming our meals. The best thing is to avoid drinking large quantities of any liquid with a meal. The reason is because it interrupts digestion. It dilutes the hydrochloric acid and other enzymes inside our digestive system. So really, rule of thumb is, make sure you're hydrating, but don't drink 30 minutes before you eat, and ideally don't drink for an hour after eating. Sipping a little bit during the course of a meal, fine, just to wash down food, but not consuming a lot of ounces of any liquid with our meals. So those are the 2 primary components. Now, I've been emphasizing, 6 days a week for both principle number 1 and principle number 2. Principle number 3 is all about setting ourselves up for success and using a 7th day as an outlet for shifting to this new way of approaching nutrition. And we're going to dive into that next week in a way. Again, I think that the success rate on the slow carb diet is very much attributable to this 3rd step that we're going to dive into next week, that again provides a psychological relief valve for all the things that we've been denying ourselves over the course of a week, over those 6 days that we get to indulge in and are actually encouraged to indulge in on day 7. And the other dimension to this, in my experience, and we'll talk about it much more next week, is that it slowly, over weeks, we start to get much more intimately connected with our body's visceral reaction to foods, and in particular, unhealthy foods. So again, just to recap, principle number 1 of this, what we'll call the PurePower approach to nutrition, is avoiding white foods, really limiting carbs in favor of lean proteins, leafy green veggies, and legumes. And principle number 2 is avoiding and really eliminating sugar 6 days of the week. So I'm really looking forward to next week diving in for that 3rd principle that's going to set us up for success over the course of 30 days. And just something to look forward to. The slow carb diet, there was a study of 3,000 people in 2013 run in conjunction with an app that's now called Coach.me. And 85% of the people that stuck with it for 30 days lost at least 9 pounds, and 15% of people lost at least 15 pounds. And importantly, I think the statistics are there that the slow carb diet and the approach that we're advocating, it's sustainable long term, because it's not calorie counting, it's not counting macronutrients. It's just an approach that emphasizes certain core principles, as we touched on, and also then we start to learn what the body really needs by listening to the body. I hope that helps. If you have questions, please let us know. And if you're enjoying this, please also let us know. It would mean so much to me and to our entire team at PurePower. Until then, enjoy the rest of the week. Have a fantastic weekend, and look forward to talking with you next week.